very important book, and I'm just going to rip your well, you guys know the story. So I'm not going to go there. I'm going to let Andy just take care of everything, and thank you again.
Well, I'm Allison's dad, and I wish there had never been a reason to write this book. You know, I'd much rather be watching Allison do the news and, you know, having her text me in the middle of a commercial break when she's on the anchor desk, and, you know, have that call after she gets off work when, you know, she says, "Dad, how did it go? You know, what did you think?" You know, we all miss her. She brightened up everybody's day in the New River Valley in Roanoke as they were getting ready for work and having their morning cup of coffee. And, you know, she was like, people felt like they knew her. She was family. And about a month after Allison was killed, I got a call from a friend, author Beth Macy. She's a New York Times best-selling author, and we'd become friends, and she said, "Andy, you got a book here." And I went, "Beth, I don't know." But Beth said, "You know, you've got a book here," and I thought, well, you know, people have seen this. I don't know that I can add anything to it. But I didn't dismiss it completely because she does know a thing or two about, you know, writing. So I thought, okay. So Barbara and I spent the next year just traveling around the country and speaking out about gun violence and the toll it takes. And the more I talked to people with stories like ours, I thought about what Beth had said, and I thought, well, maybe now's the time. And I'd never done anything other than writing op-eds here and there, but I wanted to tell a story. You know, I knew that there was a desire there to tell a story about all of this, and you know, I wanted to do it like Allison, because she knew how to tell a story. She did it 5 times a week, and she wanted to tell important stories, and did. You know, and about issues that people cared about. She didn't want to be known as just the pretty blonde reporter. She wanted to be known as a journalist. Well, I knew I needed help to do this, and Allison's boyfriend, Chris Hurst, armed me with all the primers that an aspiring author needs. He gave me Elements of Style, Mary Carr's The Art of Memoir, and my favorite was Stephen King's On Writing. So I plowed through all of these, and you know, I was ready to go. So the book was to be a part memoir, part current affairs, and part call to action. And as one of the primers suggested, if you're writing a memoir, the most important, you start with the hardest part, and I knew what that was. It was called The Day. You know, and it was agony writing it. You know, I'd start writing, get a few hundred words into it, and then I'd melt down. And then I'd regroup, and I'd start in again, and I'd get a few hundred words in, and I'd do it again. I mean, it was very difficult, but I knew it needed to get done. So this went on for about a week, and I finally finished the chapter. And I sent it to Beth Macy, you know, thinking, please let her, you know, say good things about it. And unfortunately, she was very complimentary. And said, you know, you got something here. So with that part behind me, I got online, and I found a site that listed every literary agent known to mankind and what their specialty was and what they were looking for. And that's where I found a woman named Lori Liss with Sterling Lord Literistic. And I didn't know it at the time, but the first book that she did was The Bridges of Madison County. So I figured, well, you know, I'm in good hands. So I sent her the chapter. She was like, yep, want to do something with you. I sent her the chapter, and at that point I decided to collaborate with a young man here, Ben Williams, on the rest of the manuscript. He was a very talented reporter that I had met at the Martinsville Bulletin. You know, Ben knew me, he knew Allison, and most importantly, he knew my voice. And our strategy was that I would write about every significant event that happened over the course of this journey, and he would polish it up, and take the manuscript and also do the book proposal. So when we were finished, Laurie started shopping it to publishers. And the feedback we got from every major publishing house that we sent it to was not what we expected. They just said, without exception, we love the story, we hate the subject matter, i.e. the gun issue. And it's like, you're kidding. Well, this book is more than the gun issue. It's more, so much more than about death. It's about Allison's life. And I wanted people to know more about her. I wanted them to know about how accomplished she was, and how she touched others. And people would share their Allison stories with me, and stories that I'd never heard that just made my heart melt. Well, I got a message from a reader that perfectly captured what I tried to accomplish in this book. And we were talking about, Tanya and I, we were talking about this earlier. She wrote, I'm reading your book. It took me a while to start, as I looked upon it as like watching Schindler's List. A must-do as a human, but something I was not looking forward to doing. I want to say it's not like this at all. It's an insight into your thoughts on guns, the NRA, Trump, religion, all of which I can't agree with more. But it's also a celebration of your beautiful and smart daughter. I cannot applaud you more for the guts it took you to write it. So I guess I succeeded. That was my aim. I remember talking to a young woman 2 years before, as we were going through this issue with finding a publisher. She said, and this was before I even was ready to start writing a book. She said, "I'm with Apollo Publishers. We think you've got a story here, and we want to be the ones to tell it." So, I wasn't going to run out the clock, so I said, "Yep, you're on, let's do this." And I think what really validated my choice of selecting them was their decision to go, with what to put on the cover. And I always thought it would be this picture of Allison, this iconic picture that you've probably seen on the news, in the red dress sitting at the anchor desk, but they said, no, this is the one we got to run with. And when I saw the mock-up, it was like, oh yeah, this is it, because you can see the energy and the confidence and the joy that was Allison. And it's one of the stories I tell in the book about this particular day. There was a pre-Thanksgiving, the day before Thanksgiving, freak snowstorm that was isolated along the I-81 corridor just north of Roanoke. And when Allison finished her hit for WDBJ7, she was off the air, story finished. Her cameraman Adam took that picture, and the news director called and said, well, you got one more story to do. And I remember getting a text from her, at like 9:15. She said, Dad, I'm going to be on CNN in 10 minutes. I'm so nervous. And I said, Scooter, don't worry about it. I said, it's nothing different than what you just did, but except that instead of 60,000 viewers, you're going to have 6 million. No pressure. Well, no biggie. Yeah. Well, she just nailed it. And, you can see this is the rest of her news team. They were in the studio, like, cheering her on. Well, I've shared other stories in the book about the time Allison was, from the time she was growing up to the time she was doing the news, and I'm going to read you an excerpt of my favorite Allison story of her news career, and it was when she was a reporter at WCTI 12 in Jacksonville, North Carolina. She was tipped off that there was going to be a major meth lab bust in the county. State as well as local police were involved, and the lead investigator assured Allison that they would be working long through the night at the crime scene. She requested the only live truck the station had for the entire area so she could lead the 10 o'clock news with a live report. Before long, Allison and her crew were on the scene, raring to go. At 9:45 p.m., the lead investigator called out to his team, "Okay, guys, that's it. Let's wrap it up." Well, Allison panicked. Her story was tanking before her eyes. She went to the lead investigator and asked if they could just please stick around for a few more minutes for her live shot. Now, a lot of law enforcement officers would have shaken their heads no. However, politely, the lead investigator didn't. "Sure, Allison, we got you covered," he said. He then instructed his men to fire up the flashing light bars on all the squad cars. He positioned his team in the background of the shot and armed them with clipboards, which they furiously scribbled notes on as the cameras rolled. It was a dramatic scene and made a great backdrop for Allison's report, and of course she nailed it. Now some readers would conclude, aha, fake news, but it wasn't. Law enforcement busted a meth lab. The outcome was the same either way. It was a benign recreation, the kind of harmless small-town courtesy that could have happened in Mayberry, North Carolina as easily as Jacksonville. What was it like being Allison's dad? It was getting up each day with a heart bursting with pride. When I was running for the Henry County Board of Supervisors just before she was killed, I only halfway joked that my campaign slogan was, "I'm Allison's dad." So when I mentioned my campaign slogan to Allison, she said, "Dad, you can't do that. I'll get in trouble." And I said, "Scooter, relax." I said, I'm not going to have yard signs printed up that say, "I'm Allison's dad," and then people think it's funny when I joke about it with them, and I promise not to get you in trouble. Now, this book is also about honoring my daughter with action. Allison's death and the way she died gave me fuel to channel my grief and anger into activism. It's taking the most devastating thing that can happen to a parent and turn tragedy into something constructive. It's been quite the journey, and I've been fortunate to have a platform, thanks in large part to the journalism community, your son. They've always been very gracious, and as I've said many times, Allison was part of the journalism community, and they've always provided a venue for me to share my message. Now, I've encountered a few politicians along the way, as you can imagine, and some, like Senators Kane and Warner and former Governor Terry McAuliffe, are now, I consider them friends. Now, on the other side, not so much. In the book, I tell a story about my encounter with my Virginia state senator, who tried to get a special prosecutor to investigate me, and in the process he made himself look childish and petty. It's in the chapter called $12 Bill, and you'll see why that name is when you read it. I also talk about my experience working with the major gun violence prevention, or GVP organizations out there, and I talk about their strengths and weaknesses and my impression of how effective their messages have been. And then there's the NRA and its radical absolutists who think any sensible gun legislation is tantamount to removing the Second Amendment. Oops. I think I got it. Oh, there it is. Yeah. That's, my wife Barbara did that slide. So, yeah, they think that, anything you do is a repeal of the Second Amendment. Since her murder, the constants I hear from people are, "I'm so sorry for your loss," and "I can't imagine." And they're right. No one can imagine the unimaginable, but it's what I did for 2 years to try and convey that with this book for the readers. And those that have lost a loved one or a close friend to a sudden or unexpected death can relate to this experience, but the horrific way that Allison died, it captured the world's attention. The Virginia Tech, the Sandy Hook, Aurora, Parkland, recently the Virginia Beach shootings, they weren't filmed, they were only reported. So in the aftermath of these shootings, what you saw were pictures of, smiling children and dads and fathers and family, from their days on earth. You never saw the horror that they experienced. The video of Allison's murder is still, as we speak, on the internet today. And it's one of the nasty byproducts dealing with the truthers or the hoaxers. These are the people that think I'm a crisis actor, that think that Allison's, believe it or not, that think Allison's murder is all, made up. And when I tell people, I share this with people, they're like in shock and disbelief that something like this could happen, but it does. You know, and after fighting for more than a year to have the videos of that murder removed from YouTube, I decided to go after Google because they're the enablers of these people. They're enablers of the trolls. They violate their own terms of service. They violate copyright law. And when they do take down content, it's purely arbitrary and kind of ad hoc. Instead of self-policing, which they claim that they do, oh, well, we block this stuff, but they don't. They, you know, they pass it along to me to flag content, and that's just unacceptable. So last fall, I retained the services of the Georgetown University Civil Rights Law Clinic to help me remove all this, and we demanded that Google remove all hoaxer-related content as well as the moment of death video from YouTube. What most people don't get is they may not be running an ad below the video, but whenever you click on something, they monetize it. They take that data and they package it and sell it. So what we're demanding is that they do the right thing. They take all this, you know, have some human decency and be a responsible corporate citizen. And if they refuse, they're subject to liability. And we're working on that literally as, like, right now. From Sandy Hook to Parkland to, you know, you name it, you know, other families have been victimized just like I have. So, and in some cases even more so. So I'm working not just for me, but, you know, we're doing this for them for them as well. You know, Google recently announced last week that they would remove the kind of hoaxer and abusive content from YouTube that I just mentioned. But as we speak, again, the murder of Allison's video, one in particular, has been up, still up, been reported, and has over 800,000 views. So now I'm working with Senator Kaine and Congressman Pallone from New Jersey on joint legislation that will finally address this issue. And it's in a subject, or it's, well, I'm going to not get too far down in the weeds, but it's Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act, which basically gives all these social media platforms complete immunity from any liability for the content that they put on. And that's why they don't do anything, because they don't have to.
Isn't it bad publicity for them?
They don't care. They make money on this stuff, and they just don't care. So, you know, there's a limit to free speech, and what we're doing is just saying you can't put murder up there. You can't, you know, and I don't trust them. You know, they say they're going to do this. They told me they're taking this stuff down. They're not going to do anything until they're regulated, and so that's what we're doing. And we're going to create this bill, this language, craft this language. Georgetown and Kaine's office are working together on language, and we're calling it Allison's Law, because you put a face and a name with it, and people go, okay, this means something. So stay tuned for that. I'm often asked what I'd like to see that would make a difference on you know, in terms of gun control. And it's pretty simple stuff, really. I talk about universal background checks, closing the gun show loopholes for flea market and, you know, and internet sales, extreme risk protective orders, all that good stuff right there. I mean, it's just simple stuff. 97% of the American public wants this done. You can't get 97% of the American people to agree that Mother's Day is a good thing, but they do on this. And these are measures that are also supported by the vast majority of gun owners. But unfortunately, the NRA staunchly, you know, we know what they do. They staunchly oppose it, but they don't represent hunters and sportsmen anymore, or gun safety. They're nothing more than high-paid lobbyists for the gun industry. So how do we achieve these goals, and what's my role? Well, I want to weaponize this book because it is a call to action. And as we've seen over the last few years, the NRA and those that they control in the state houses and Congress, they're controlled by the NRA. They're going to block anything and everything. You know, I was coached early on by Everytown. Sorry, Tanya. I was coached early on. It's like, Andy, don't make this a partisan issue. It shouldn't be a partisan, you know, it can't be a partisan issue. But, you know, I just said, it is a partisan issue. You know, the reality is it's a partisan issue, except for the handful of, you know, maybe 8 congressmen that are out there. It's, you know, so I had to you know, it's the Republican Party is the party of the NRA, and it's only getting worse. You know, their majority in the slim majority in the Virginia General Assembly killed every single gun control measure that was up for consideration in January. After Virginia Beach, the governors called a special session on July 9th. I plan to be there and see if these guys do the same thing, because Barbara and I testified for an extreme risk protective order, and they looked at me and said, you know, we're really sorry for your loss, and they voted right straight along party lines to kill this extreme risk protective order, which other states are now, you know, it's passing. We might actually get that passed. We might actually shame them into doing that, but the rest of them, you know, I don't think, you know, I don't think that they're going to budge on anything else. So, as our governor said, you know, if you can't change their minds, you change their seats, and that's what we've got to do. I'm going to keep doing what I've been doing for the last 3 years and use my notoriety and my voice to get gun sense candidates elected, because, you know, it's incumbent upon us that we can't elect people. We have to elect people that will make us safe instead of offer thoughts and prayers, which is kind of their typical deal. And you know, the thing is, the NRA and their Republican colleagues, they treat the 90 people a day killed by gun violence in this country as collateral damage. And what they're counting on is that the public to become so desensitized to this issue, that to these mass shootings that seem to happen every other week, that people go, oh, I've had enough. I can't deal with it anymore. We can't let that happen. So as Barbara and Chris and I fight for stricter gun laws in this country, we want people to remember Allison not for the way she died, but for the way she lived. The Allison B. Parker Scholarship in Journalism at James Madison University is endowed at more than $250,000, and the next generation of journalists will be part of her legacy. And it was the fastest growing scholarship in the history of the university. Barbara and I created the For Allison Foundation. It's a nonprofit that provides arts experiences for young people in Southwest Virginia. Yep. This always gets me. And Chris was elected delegate. He's like a second son. He's doing a great job for the people in Southwest Virginia. So I'll leave you with this. I recently reconnected with a colleague of mine from my days as a headhunter. And about 1.5 years ago, she and her husband were in this horrific car wreck. You know, the Jeep, they were in a Jeep, it flipped over, landed on the roof on the guardrail. She walked away with bruises. Her husband had massive head injuries and lived in a vegetative state for a month, and then he died. And she said, Andy, she said, I'm lost. She said, what do I do? And it was kind of, you know, nobody's ever asked me that before, and it kind of like hit me very quickly. It's like, Kathy, you got to find a purpose. You have to. I don't know what that purpose is for you, but once you find it and embrace it, the way we did, you know, with you know, for what we're doing for Allison, you're never going to be whole, but you'll be able to live, and you'll be able to, you know, keep on, as it were. And that was Allison's gift to us. She gave us that purpose to make a difference in other people's lives. Scooter and I, we spoke or texted every single day, every day. And even though, as a family, we never were, you know, I love you. We never said that often, but we always had we knew that love was a constant. It was an abiding love and we were very close-knit as a family. And I know the love is still there, and she's with me every step of the way, cheering me on. And you know, this book is as much her gift to me as it was mine to her, and I think she'd be proud. Thank you.